Hey, everybody, Matt from ClickBid. And yes, I know tonight is a podcast on AI. To my marketing person, I know. But tomorrow we're doing a podcast on somebody from our staff. It's going to be really cool. She has just an enormous amount of experience in event fundraising, all different parts of the company. So it's going to be incredibly good. It's just that what's going on in AI right now is just unprecedented and crazy and insane. And so yeah, I'm probably biased, but last week, Claude, I don't know, Claude didn't really come out with anything last week. For whatever reason, the market's picked up on Claude Cowork, and Cowork is um, the attempt of Claude Code to become more available to non-developers in that it can do things other than just give you content back, like writing or looking at your emails or stuff like that. It actually does what's called tool use and it Agentic, and it actually goes out and does things, writes software, posts software, interacts with external services, and so on. And so this is just an absolute game changer for, well, in theory, it's a game changer. But the challenge is we don't know how, real world production ready this stuff really is. And so but just on the market news, the stocks of these software companies are starting to go down. They rebounded, and then Claude came out with 4.6, which, is just marginally, not marginally, but it is better than 4.5. There's a huge context window upgrade. So there's a lot of things that they're doing to improve the platform. But again, it is still a continuation of the large language model, the predictive text tools that help you build, better product, but it's really based on the same kind of concepts. It's just getting better. So what I've been doing alongside all of this and the crazy hype, and I listened to a New York Times article or podcast today about how somebody built a website for one of their reporters, and it is amazing. But what I want to show you is a real world example of something we did on the alongside. So I've been working in Claude since it came out last year, and through all the different versions, from the really rough start to where we are today. And I will admit it is amazing. But I also work alongside talented, exceptionally high end developers. And what I do in Claude is I use it for everything. I would consider myself a mid-level developer. Again, I've said this before that I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Software development, certainly not as sharp as my team of like full-time professional developers. So what I use Claude for is I use it as, to get me to that higher level to write great code. But at the same time, it's measured against developers who really know what they're looking at day in, day out, high top quality, standards driven, debug. It's just, yeah. So what's it's an interesting take for me because I actually get to see what Claude writes, and my team gets to review it and tell me, yeah, this doesn't make sense, or well, I see what maybe it was doing, but you just created a bunch of extra code. Now we have bloat and we have tech debt, and that's a huge deal. And I think that's what a lot of software companies are realizing is when they really get into it down the road. In the beginning, it's amazing, but then once you start to really break it down and say, okay, I need to expand this and make it better, maybe add some resources, some team members, it starts to get more complicated. And can AI really keep up with that standards base that we're used to in platforms like our platform, ClickBid, and all the way up to Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or some of these high end excellent programs that are just bulletproof, very heavy, load tested, everything. Can AI really do that? Well, anyway, let's give you an example. So my wife wants to build a game, and she's a really cool idea. She's going to Hawaii for a project with some team members. She works in commercial video, and to help the team members feel a little bit more connected to each other, she's wanted to create this bingo game. And so, she started to explain it to me, and she said, "Hey, with all your AI stuff, and because I know you basically stay up all night working on this, so can you help me?" And I said, "Stop. Here's what I want to do." Took up my phone, loaded up Claude, and I turned on the microphone and I said, "Now just tell me what you want it to do." And so she did. You can see on my screen here, it says, "I want to do a photo bingo game only instead of bingo." And so she dictated. Claude got back to us. And again, this is the app, not Claude Code. gave us some response. Then it asked us some questions. Something point out here. You know, uh, this sounds like a really fun team-based photo scavenger hunt. It's almost like what it's doing is it's trying to, I don't know, prove to you that it heard what you said. Like I didn't need you to say all this. Um, but it is going through, basically repeating what you said back, asking for clarification. It did ask me three clarifying questions. Seems like that's kind of the golden number. Let's ask three questions. I don't know how, like, if it would ask five sometimes and three sometimes and two sometimes, or hey, I got everything I need. I'm just going to build the dang thing. I don't know, but it did ask me three. We gave it some answers, and then it did this. Got it. So to clarify, again, it basically told me exactly what I told it the first time. And I said, yep. Okay. So then it started building. And inside of Claude, it built down here a JSX file. Now, if I load this thing up in VS Code, yeah, it's impressive. You've got your kind of default variables that get set. Then you have an entire container here, like a export function of the whole module. A lot of sub stuff in here, like a loading screen, join screen, the game, and so on. Lots of stuff. And at first glance, it's impressive. Like, wow, there's styles that it built. And it's like, where did it get all this? It kind of took it from the Aloha, the Hawaii thing. But okay, what? And more importantly, I don't know if I can actually do it. If I click, oh yeah, if I click on it, it loads it. Um, oh, interesting. It looks different on this one, but enter your team name. I don't think on my phone it didn't do anything. So I just hit join. Yeah. Okay. So, yep, allow. Okay. And oh, I guess kind of. But anyway, you can see it did. I don't know. It did something, but it doesn't work. Essentially, I mean, now you're dead in the water. So this is where you could kind of get as somebody who's just trying to, put something together. You're a product person, maybe you don't really understand code, but you understand product. You're a sales rep and you want to prototype some cool new thing, but this is about as far as you can get. And frankly, again, this is all the styles in the code, but you don't really get there. So how do you get it? It's not just like in the New York Times podcast, they don't actually have a real website. There's nothing you could share with anybody. People couldn't go to it, that kind of stuff. I know that Claude is working on it to create a fully contained platform like a Render, Vercel, Replit, DigitalOcean, where you can just say, cool, now put this online somewhere and give me a temporary URL and kind of bridge that gap. It's coming and probably not that far away. But today, this is as far as I could get. And this is impressive. It's from my phone. I didn't even use my computer. I loaded it up here. So what I did was then I went to terminal. And so I have Claude Code and I went in, I have a Max account. So I just loaded it up and I said, okay, well, it actually compacted. So I don't have the original. So what I did was I said, okay, what I want, Claude. And I said, let's have a real conversation here. I have a directory on my computer. It's called Aloha. I took the JSX file. I put it in that folder. I want you to read that file. And I want these things. As a developer, I know that I want you to put this on Render. I want you to use a PostgreSQL for a database backend. I want you to have block storage for the photos. I want you to access the camera. And I want you to build all of this based on everything that I got in a conversation with Claude Desktop, which is great. I mean, this is kind of like step one. And then step two is to come into Claude Code and say, now build this as an actual web application and get started. I want you to use, because they also came out, I think last week with Claude, I think it's a team of agents where instead of spinning out parallel agents, it actually creates a team with a manager layer and then sub agents that you can break into. So I said, I want a UI UX team member. I want a PostgreSQL team member. I want a render.com expert. I want a debugger, QA. And so these are all the things I want. I don't want you to stop working until you've tested it. I want you to publish it to a GitHub repo. And I want you to set up a PostgreSQL database on my Docker. I have a Docker desktop running so it can spin up PostgreSQL databases all day long. Now, again, if I didn't know any of these things, I'd be, this is where you kind of have to have some dev background. So this is another barrier that we're having to overcome as developers. Developers, this is great. I mean, none of what I'm saying is complicated, but then it went and it did it and it just got going and it ground out this really good one shot game. I was blown away, but then before I go to show you the game, I then went back and I said, oh, well, my wife actually created this cool background that she wants to use for the bingo card. She actually created the bingo squares that she wants to use. So I said, okay, Claude, now I want you to take this background image. I actually did go to Nano Banana and actually recreated the background image as just a standard background. And then I said, now I said, okay, well, use this as as your color palettes, and I'll pick all the colors and the buttons and all that stuff. And, there was a back and forth, but by the time I was done, this is what it came up. It's an Aloha. I'm running it locally. So I can log in with my email, password. I can create an account if I want to. So if I sign in, and then it created this interface with a header. And then now I said, it created the features of, okay, there should be a code. If you want to create a new event, it's going to take, and right now the events are just like, if I want to have team A, team B, team C, no, I want to have event A, event B, but it's going to use the same 24 words. Each person who joins my team will get a different order of words. They're got the same pictures you have to take, but they're in different order. So, kind of like a regular bingo card. Guess I could have just said that. And then when you click join game, you can put in your code. But in this case, I just already have it. So now when my wife's team is in Hawaii and they're doing their work and they're bored and they want to compete with each other on a team, they can now go and find all these things. So, and she customized it to her team. So, Jen outside, I don't know, Jen's on the team. She maybe never goes outside. So when she does, everybody's going to take a picture. But anyway, I see a fish. I take a photo, hi everybody, and then use that photo. And now I've got a fish. And if I want to see how the team's doing, I can see Maddie here's got one photo. Laura hasn't even taken a photo. She needs to get on her horse. And then I can see that Matt has got the center grid going. But, obviously I don't want to show off the photos. And this was actually something that Claude generated. I just said, I want people to see progress. And it came up with this show kind of a ghosted grid pattern. And, so now I know the best that I can say is that Matt's got, 3 more to finish his grid. So, Laura obviously has a long way to go and she's got her free space, and that's it. I mean, now what I then did was I said, okay, go to, what I want you to do is publish this to render. And so now what I'm doing is I'm posting it to render. I actually had it go to GitHub. It created a GitHub repo. So it did all that for me. And then it wrote this README file. These are things that it's done for me in the past. And I just, at first I'm just swept up in all the excitement that holy cow, it did this. What the breakthrough is that I get to prototype something in so much more speedy and more realistic ways than ever before. Like, if I wanted to prototype something like this, I would draw it, I'd sketch it, and then, maybe put it together in just, like a Google slide deck to see the workflow, maybe, Lucid chart, and I'd build a chart layout for it, maybe Figma, but I can give it just light paperwork. I mean, just real basic stuff. Like I spoke to my phone and through a couple of steps. Now, yes, I've taken those steps before. Some of those do require technical knowledge. It's absolutely fascinating. However, the reason I think that we are disconnected from what we're seeing in the markets, where there's this huge drop off of market value and untethered from reality, is the other work that I'm doing in ClickBid, because I am, as a developer, I'm pushing myself as hard as I can. to build great code to build into the platform that I have. But when I asked Claude to do something, as an example, it created a new controller, in our Laravel application. And when I sent it to GitHub for my senior dev to look at, he came back and said, "Why did you create this file? We already have one. So now you've duplicated it." Well, Claude didn't know, or it didn't go investigate, or it didn't even try. And now I have technical debt because if we change something, I now have to change it in the controller that Claude wrote for my API. And then I have to change it for the base application that uses that controller. And what happens is, you know, over time, that just grows and grows and grows and grows. And now you have this huge mess on your hands and you're trying to build these enterprise level platforms. And Claude doesn't have, it doesn't think the way, well, think, it doesn't work the way that people work in that, you know, I know in my memory, I've stored this memory of when I build something, I need to remember to go look for it somewhere else and make sure that I don't duplicate my work and create technical debt. And so Claude doesn't do that yet. It can, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but you can't force it to some degree. You can't force it to do that. And you're just really kind of, rolling the dice at times to see what it can actually, what it will do. And you will find yourself putting something to GitHub, doing a, PR, and your dev team will kick back and say, hold on, it works. What you just did works. But man, if we had to run that at scale, we would have some problems. And there's a high likelihood that that will fail once you start to get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 concurrent users. That's going to be a problem, which is why we use this. And you really should have had Claude do that. Now I have to go back and get Claude to learn this. So that's, I think, what happens. And then what you hear is, well, okay, Matt, but hold on. Claude Code is really good at its own projects. If you're like this, I mean, honestly, I mean, look at the Aloha thing here I mean, nothing wrong with it. It works. Everything clicks, everything functions. I'm not getting error messages or, I'm only running it for 10 people. Great. But if all of a sudden this thing gets traction and I want to kind of move, like, let's say I want to turn this into a fundraiser, which I do. And now I want to roll this into something a little bigger. Yes, Claude has done a great job building this isolated platform. And it's amazing. Oh my gosh, look what it built. Look what it built. It's going to disrupt everything. However, what happens when my product team says, or my marketing team says, or my sales team says, yeah, it needs to integrate with this thing over here. And we need people to be able to upload their own backgrounds. And we need it to, have 48 squares instead of 24. So you start adding these features. And now what was hidden inside of your code base is tech debt. But because it works, you don't notice it. And now you start to add things to it. And then Claude actually creates its own technical debt on top of itself. And then you start to see what you would have seen in a more legacy-based platform when you're trying to bring Claude alongside of a professional dev team. So it's the same problem. It's just you don't see it until later when you start from scratch, I guess is all I'm saying. So, and I don't know, this is just an aside, but I put it on LinkedIn today where I said, if you really want to see how fast and loose people are building Claude, ChatGPT, just subscribe to their status pages. I mean, honestly, 5, 6 times a day, you're getting services that are disrupted, performance issues, something isn't working, this is down, this is down. I mean, and then as a comparison, subscribe to AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Salesforce or Cloudflare. Those services, they have infinitely more services than Claude or OpenAI, and you just don't get updates because those platforms are solid and they're not allowed to crash. I mean, when Cloudflare goes down maybe once every other year, it is a massive, massive deal. I mean, half the internet goes down. So they cannot have any risk. Their code has to be perfect. Their deployments have to be perfect. So they don't let their junior developers build something and then roll it out into production. It just doesn't work that way. So I think that's where I think the gap is, and we're starting to close it. But it's just a question of will will an LLM be able to reason the way that a developer reasons, such that it creates the consistency that we have become used to in software development. So anyway, that's my soapbox. I hope this was helpful. I know I had to get this out. It's just so much going on. It's like drinking from a fire hose. I promise to be less technical tomorrow when we do our podcast. So, all right. Well, thank you. Have a great night.